I know God breathe on this.
The new brand for upcoming creators, the Facebook for creators.
The community of creatives.
That's what Collective is to me, is kind of giving creatives a voice.
Welcome home, family. Today we are here with Every Human, and I'm your host, Kelsey Davis, founder and CEO of Collective, the portfolio platform connecting creators to paid opportunities. And today I am honored and blessed and favored to be with my friend, Libby Ediger, CEO of the Holberton School here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So we're gonna be talking all about her as a creator, her creative process, her process building things, right? A true architect, builder of people, culture, teams, and we're gonna learn all about her process in doing that in a multitude of ways. So I'm super excited to hop in. Let's get into it. Libby.
Hi. Hello.
My friend. How are you doing today?
I'm great.
How are you feeling right now?
I have a bit of a cold,
Okay.
like seasonal adjusting.
Yeah.
But I grew up in Oklahoma, so I'm like very used to this 4 to 6 week transitional period where you're like eating cough drops like candy and have to just bear through the cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like 71 degrees yesterday.
And
now
then today it's like 30 something, maybe 20s.
Hence the
creativity.
pulling all of my coats out for the season finally.
Man, so tell me, who is Libby?
Would you like the elevator pitch version, or where do you want to start?
I want to know who Libby is. How would you answer that?
I would say
You can use as many or as few words as you'd like.
well, I will take a couple of stabs at this. I am I think first and foremost a byproduct of the ultimate creator that guides my life and impacts my work. It impacts everything about who I am and what I do. I think from that and from a very early age, I have been someone who always wanted to create and build things. The example that I give is that I used to tie my stroller to a wagon with hair ties because I could get more baby dolls to follow me around that way. And I was just always like tinkering and building. And I think that that has not stopped both informally and formally throughout my life.
Yeah. So when you think about, so first I want to point out a couple of things you said. So you said Libby is a creator created by a creator is the first way that you'd identify as you, right? And then from there, everything that you do or create essentially flows from, right? So even you could point back to being a kid and creating using this ingenuity to be able to say, hey, I literally want to build this, assembly line of,
Stuffed animals.
Yes. All the way through. I know that you were super involved in high school with a lot of different things through when you got to college, starting in startups, starting kind of getting the political space a little bit in terms of the work that you're doing to create infrastructure, right? So tell me about what are some of the things, even from early on that you've kind of created, if you will, or that have kind of bared from you?
Yeah, I will look back and think about K-12 era of my life. There was a pretty remarkable group of other high school students around me that were starting a fundraising campaign. I grew up in a small-ish town, about an hour and 15 minutes here from Tulsa. And historically, a lot of our nonprofits had struggled. There wasn't a lot of money in town that could support all of those. So the high school students decided to come around those nonprofits, pick a different nonprofit every year, and go try and fundraise as much money as we could to give to that local cause. Cool. And I had older cousins at colleges around the country participate in something called Dance Marathon.
Yes. Very familiar.
Which is just, if you've never watched a dance marathon, you should go look it up on YouTube because it's mostly college kids.
It takes over a college campus by a storm every year.
And
it's
just
the biggest event of the year.
Chaotic, high energy, high emotions event where people are fundraising to stand on their feet. typically for a particular cause. The largest is Children's Miracle Network. And I was like, we could do that. I'm 16 years old, but like I know how to go ask for donations of food, and I did 10 years of summer camp, and so I can come up with a theme for every hour. And ended up doing 2 years worth of dance marathon there. My high school fell so in love with it as a vehicle for fundraising, and not just that it would raise money, but you had this window of 12 hours where you had the attention of 16 to 18-year-olds who were caring about something beyond themselves. They weren't on their phones. They weren't able to leave and come back. They had to be there in the gym, typically meeting with the folks that we were serving through that nonprofit. And I was like, it was a high. Like, I've got to keep doing this. So I get to George Washington University, which is where I went to college. And in orientation week, so like July, before I have even shown up for school, I go to the student office of, I don't know, student excellent office. I was like, great, I'd like to sign up for your dance marathon organization. And they said, we don't have one. I said, great, I would like the paperwork to start a dance marathon organization. And ended up doing that all over again in college. So I think to get more specific beyond just like, I like to build things. It's like, I love getting to find a team of people who care so deeply about the goal and the end mission that like, it doesn't matter how many hours it's going to take. It doesn't matter if we are like just using sheer force to make it happen. That you all get to rally around something together, and then have something when you step away, you can say like, we did that, we built that. I can be proud of it.
And that sounds like a true creative process to me when it comes from, okay, let's have a vision. What is the one thing that we're all galvanizing around that kind of gives us the purpose to even choose to show up to the space? And then it's, us as individuals, as a creator, it's like, okay, how could we use our gifts to serve this vision, right? So whether that's, okay, you could physically, literally dance, you could financially give money, there's these different verticals of how you can use your gift to bring it to the table. And then you as this leader, this creator, can essentially direct and organize our ability to see the vision through by having all of our gifts at the table, engineering that thing, building it, doing the friction, going back and forth, having fun in that process, and then bearing the end product out of that actually goes to the end consumer.
And I think what's been fun to watch, if I'm doing this exercise in real time with you, looking back over my life, is to think about how I have changed and where I have grown in my ability to do that well. One of my very first coworkers handed me a book at the startup that I was at prior to my current role, called Thinking in Systems. And the first whole chapter is just about like how water flows in and out of a bathtub. And I was like, this is dumb. But I was really struggling with putting some structure behind the ideas that I had, the energy I had, the excitement I had. And some of those skills were developing in real time, going from high school to college, leaving college into the startup ecosystem. But that book, and frankly, that coworker, helped me really galvanize that I don't just have energy behind what I do. How can I build structures and systems? A, so that my energy has a place to be productive. And B, so that I can help other people be productive in the gifts that they bring to the table, the things that they're naturally good at. And I'm far from an expert on it, but if you ask anyone that works with me now, we talk about systems all the time.
And do you see that as essentially developing your creative process almost? Like when you talked about what you were doing 16, 17, running these dance marathons, to now your role at Holberton, which we'll get into, you're kind of doing the same thing relatively in terms of, we have this vision, let's build a team, let's identify people's gifts, kind of motivate, incentivize people to show up, and then, manage that thing so that we are then producing the outcome that goes to the end consumer, and then learn to get the data and then do it again. Do you see that kind of as a creative process? And it's almost like, you as the individual creator participating in that creative process, we have to kind of retrospectively or even actively, consciously evaluate what is our role in this and how are we doing, and how can we as an individual adjust so that we're doing better at participating in this creative process.
Totally. I think that anyone that you find that has raw talent is going to want to use that talent in the fullest capacity that they can. but you may have a particular outcome that you need to achieve. And it is, as a leader, it's your responsibility to give them, I just went bowling a few weeks ago. So like the bumpers, like to give them the guardrails to operate in, and teach them how to identify and build those guardrails for themselves. So like, yes, I think it is the process, but I also think that to some degree, it's deciding what isn't in the process. It's deciding what isn't worth our energy, even if it's fun or even if it could have some outcomes. Yeah. If we've got 2 or 3 goals that we have to get done because they cascade into the next goals, then helping build those systems, put in those structures so that people can have that thing to run towards.
Correct. And I think that also allows people to be autonomous beings in spaces. Like I'm someone, as a child, I was always breaking things, or like in class, let's say, like I'd finish my work, I already wrote the paper or whatever, and I'm sitting in class and all the other kids are still doing their assignments, and I just get up and I'd like walk around and like talk to my friend who's like still working on their assignment, or just trying to, I don't know, maybe just go talk to another teacher and just be like, hey, so what's going on with you? Or like, hey, why is this thing this way? And just always trying to extract as much value, let's say, out of the environment, that it's like, okay, well, if I have to be here at this school, right? If I know I can't just walk out and leave, like how could I at least make sure that I'm having fun, let's say? And I think it wasn't until I got older, I started realizing, okay, lines aren't bad. Systems aren't bad. Structure is not bad. It's how can we make sure that, you kind of alluded to this earlier, whatever it is that we're here to do, individuals have the resources, the tools, the network they need, but still the space they need to create in that environment. But if you don't give enough structure, often you can have a lot of energy, but that energy is just kind of moving throughout the space and still may do good things. But if everyone is doing that, it's not going to ultimately allow the main thing that we have to do get accomplished. And so it's like, yes, we want everyone to have fun. We want everyone to feel like when they're coming to work or coming into whatever space it is, this is a playground where we can run wild and go free. But playgrounds have parameters, right?
Rules.
Playgrounds literally have, like, let's say these fire codes or these safety requirements, but to the child, they don't realize that when they go to the playground. All they see is a yellow slide, green monkey bars, and your parents may watch you like from the outside, but it's already built in a way that allows you to play. And
I think what leaders struggle with, and I'm the first to admit, as someone who's still very young in my career, that if I have that vision, or if I have a sense of what we need to do from point A to point B, if point B being our goal, that if I don't build those parameters well and those systems well, I end up micromanaging, because I have to step in and figure out, okay, you're meandering, or we're not getting there fast enough. Well, ultimately that's my responsibility, or part of my responsibility is setting up the environment so that people can thrive.
And you're a CEO.
Yes.
Right. And so Libby is a CEO, a young 20-something CEO who is literally running a school. Right. First of all, tell me how we got there. Right. Back to Tulsa, running a school, and tell me why specifically this school, and why this position of leadership at this stage of your life right now. Like, why is this the vessel you choose to be a creator within?
So we don't have to go into the details now, or happy to dive into them at some point. But prior to this, I was at a software startup, was on the very early team, and got to see the teams be built, the product come to life in front of my eyes. I largely was on the business development team, and also did some of the kind of out-of-home marketing campaign work at that startup. I was living in Washington, D.C., absolutely loved the city. College brought me up there, and I had friends and had this incredible job. And I actually was home visiting my parents when I met a boy at a college football tailgate, which, given that I grew up in a college town, just feels like fate.
Anybody who knows Libby, that's the perfect
fate bringing me home. But I met Tim, who is now my husband.
My boy Tim.
He's the
Let's
best.
go, Tim.
Big hype for Tim.
Shout out my man, the cyclist of Tulsa.
He's the greatest. If you have never met Tim, you should meet him. He's remarkable. He's an engineer, but he also is like the world's best hobbyist. Like our garage does not fit cars because there are kegerators and there are bikes and there are 3 different kinds of smokers. And he just has a knack for finding these incredible hobbies that most of them have like really lovely byproducts that I get to participate in, like drinking beer and eating barbecue. But I met Tim. We ended up dating long distance for over 2 years. He was here in Tulsa working in oil and gas. I was up in DC. And this is so tacky and cliche, but it is so true that as I was falling in love with this person in my life, I began to fall in love with Tulsa because I would come visit every 6 to 8 weeks. And so getting to see this city that I was familiar with from being a kid, really transform in front of my eyes and start to get involved, or at least on the periphery, start to see some of the work that was being done to support entrepreneurs to build a technology-based economy. Those are things that I cared about in my current role.
And were they surprising to you? Because at the time, you're from Oklahoma, right? I'm from Georgia, relatively similar. Sure. I went to New York to go to college. Like it was one of those, okay, I gotta go to New York.
I was gonna leave. Like one-way ticket.
Exactly.
I'm not coming back.
Yeah. Sure. You go to DC, right? We have incredible experiences in college, really in alignment with purpose and feeling like finding calling and now being able to do the work in real time. And then it's like as you're coming back, you're literally creating home with someone literally, right? Spiritually, intimately. And in the same process, a lot of those values, it seems like, it's almost like your eyes are starting to open up and see, oh, wait, like I can have all these things that I had with me at GW, that I had in DC, the things that made me this creator, this visionary that you had when you were in high school, but kind of be able to bring all that together and then to do that in one place and in a way that you are a unique individual, bringing your specific brain, skill sets, and also kind of range of sight.
I definitely felt like I was in the right place at the right time. Like the elements of this burgeoning tech ecosystem were starting to pop up. 36 Degrees North, the co-working space here existed. There were capital providers that were starting to play. There are a number of startups that were here already. And what I couldn't yet articulate was what I saw myself doing within that world. Okay. And so what I decided to do was put my business development hat on rather, and basically like sell myself as trying to fit somewhere in this world. Yeah. And so I took like over 40 coffees with folks and said, here's what I know. I know that I want to stay involved in technology because it is a catalyst for change, not just like what the product can do, but what a technology company does for its people, for wages, for the entire kind of network effects that come from this sector. I want to be part of it, and I want to be part of it in my home state. And I want to do something where I feel like I have mission alignment. I had spent 5 years building software that I knew a lot about. I came from the political space, and that's the market that software was in. But living in DC just is a lot, watching people be on multiple sides of the same issue. And I felt like it was my turn to do something that wasn't just producing, but was like really oriented around making impact for people. And that was as far as I could articulate what I wanted to do.
Isn't it crazy how I was talking to some good friends about this? We were like in fellowship, and it was like, it's crazy how a lot of times you don't know what the thing is that you're about to create, but there are certain things that you do know. There's almost this, it's like certain things do seem radically clear, and it seems very much so. No, I do know those things. Most things seem unclear, but there is a level of, I know a lot of creators, I know myself, I'm like this. It's like, but when I do know the certain things, I do feel responsible to be obedient to giving energy to those things that I know. And then when you do give energy to those things, often new enlightenments now start to come. You start to know other things, and that takes you to then the next step.
And having coffee with that many people like started to build and sharpen what I thought that would look like. I interviewed a couple of places and talked to some founders in town. Did I want to jump on board with an existing company? There was a lot of skills that I could articulate that I had tried, but I hadn't really come to fruition in them. And ultimately, I got put in touch with the George Kaiser Family Foundation and immediately was drawn to the heart that they have for the city. And a lot of the work that they were doing around early childhood education, around combating recidivism rates, and just like, this is cool. I am so glad that you are here. And they shared that there was more work to be done around the kind of future of Tulsa, right? If we continue to invest in our young folks and we're able to support kiddos in Tulsa, regardless of what neighborhood and zip code they're born into, and give them opportunity, is this a city that they're able to stay and thrive in? And so what happens past that K-12 window was, I think, one of the questions that a lot of the folks on staff were grappling with. And so they had talked to this curriculum provider called Holberton about schools that Holberton was standing up around the world. And it just, again, right place, right time, that GKFF felt like the school could be an interesting fit for Tulsa. They needed someone to come take the lead. And a huge shout out to the one and only Mike Bosch, who's here at Atento Capital, who kind of plucked me out and said, like, I think Libby can do this. To which I said, I have never run a school before.
What was when that happened? What was your kind of initial? Because to one degree, you're literally manifesting this. You're saying, hey, these are the things that I want. These are the things that I know. Let me go talk to 40 people in the city. And then opportunity presents itself that's literally within the bounds of that. Was the immediate feeling, awesome, cool, this is exactly what I wanted?
No, not at all. No, it was not clear. I had a couple of other opportunities in front of me. Some of them were like full autonomy, kind of managing director or program lead type roles. There was a few that were senior roles at larger companies that I thought, leaving the startup world, maybe I should pivot and try something different. But at the end of the day, like when you are on an early team with a startup, you get to watch everything. You feel like you're at the table, your opinion is heard. But if you're not in that executive role, like you are not the one ultimately responsible. And so I felt like I'd been sitting there in the passenger seat for many years, and I wanted a chance to be the driver. And so I think that ultimately is part of what made Holberton such a compelling option, was like, you have to go figure this out for yourself. Like, and you'll have resources and we'll support you, but like, you're going to be the one tasked with figuring out, how do we find students? How do we launch the school? And identifying whether this is a market long-term that can fit this type of model. Yeah. And I haven't looked back since.
Yeah. And how was that process for you from day one, where you're getting your first class of students to now you have a building that's a second building within 2 years, 3 years?
3 years.
That's, I think, like 3 times the size maybe of the first one. You have a staff that has multiplied and doubled many times. Talk to me about that process of you had your startup experience. Now you're literally going from 0 to 100 basically at a brand new startup in a brand new city. And you now are the CEO of this entity.
It was so helpful that I felt like the early days building out the school infrastructure required me to lean on skills that I knew that I had. The first thing you got to do if you're going to open a school is you've got to start filing all your paperwork and getting all your ducks in a row for your regulation. The second thing you have to do is start talking to people about whether they want to be students. And that felt natural. It felt like business development, and it was out storytelling. That I had a compelling background that could speak to the value of not just software, but to the tech industry at large, because I have benefited from it. And it wasn't the industry I thought I would go into. And so I had first person experience to go talk to students and say, this is why I think that this is compelling. I had the support of the foundation to say, hey, there's this school and it sounds like they have a robotics class, and do we know anyone? And they were like, yes, we happen to know the teacher that teaches the robotics class. And it was like, great, please send the email. And so just having the full force of really just people who were here already, who had been ingrained in Tulsa and in the culture here for decades, willing to step up alongside me and put their name on the line to say, like, we think Libby is the real deal. We think that the school is a worthwhile cause. We're going to help it.
And how important was that to you in terms of when you say people stepping up to stand by you, to collaborate with you when even after it's signed off, there's a green light, but now you have to literally, it's like taking this philosophy, but now you have to go test that in the market and actually galvanize community around that and get them to participate. How important is it to have those partners, people, those advocates, those allies, in order to actually get to that true vision and goal of having people participate?
It's everything. And we were lucky that we knew that the curriculum and its kind of core had been tested in other markets. And so there was kind of this like core component that was less of a worry. But gosh, I mean, putting yourself on the line every single day to be like, hi, this is our plan and this is the school and this is why we need your support. And I mean, any founder identifies with that you feel like the grind or most of the grind is standing up and saying like, I'm not crazy. I know that this idea will work. And maybe you happen to be in an industry where everyone's like, yeah, that's iteration 3.0 or an Uber for blank. Yeah. And so you get people on board more quickly. Yeah. But a lot of founders and a lot of leaders or creators don't have that luxury. They're trying to convince you of something that has never existed before. In this case, everyone knows what a school is. And in fact, we license as a vocational school. So it's not that hard to extrapolate from like what you think of when you think of welding or cosmetology. Yeah, but the
model is completely different.
But the model is totally different.
Talk to me about that, even from a standpoint of accessibility, which I know is huge. Huge, specifically when we're talking about education, which you could argue is kind of this human fundamental right, and depending on the level of education, right? But then being able to say, hey, you can access it, but then also we have a model to make sure that there's a close to guaranteed possibility that you'll get the opportunity that you're investing in school in for the first place, which I think is a really big thing that is less calculable for people when they're making the decision to pursue higher education, at least in a modern day sense. Whereas I think Holberton's built up in a way that it's built from the ground up to be accessible and then to be, something that actually connects you to the economic opportunity once you're during, but especially after the school.
Yeah. So at the highest level, our elevator pitch is that we're a software engineering vocational school. And we, in a 20-month span, take you from probably having never written a line of code in your life to being fully prepared to be a entry-level junior software engineer. We happen to do that across a couple of different really cool specializations. We have programs in augmented reality, in virtual reality, in blockchain, in web development, and in machine learning. And so it's not just baseline software engineering. We're plugged into these elements of the sector that we think are only going to continue to grow. What makes the model really compelling here in a city like Tulsa is a couple of things. One, context setting. We don't have a public 4-year institution in the city of Tulsa. There are private universities, but there is no public 4-year degreed pathway. Really cool organizations working in town, the Tulsa Higher Education Consortium being chief among them, to connect our community colleges to pathways to bachelor's degrees. But that's a place that has left us at about 25% less college degrees than cities of our size. So when you think about building a technology ecosystem or an economy that's based on this growing tech sector, well, you got to have folks that have that experience. So that's the first thing. The second thing is some data that is relatively new that I think is just so fascinating. And that's that over 100,000 people in the Tulsa region started college classes and never graduated. So they took some kind of college class, some kind of course, but didn't get their associate's or bachelor's degrees, which tells you that there is opportunity and that there is desire, but there are barriers. Right. And maybe those barriers are individual, maybe they're systemic. We could talk about all of those.
They're big enough and general enough to where they're affecting
100,000 people. Yeah. And so we can't possibly boil the ocean, to borrow a phrase from one of my favorite humans, Connor Godfrey. So we have to focus in on where we think we can make impact. And so from our perspective as a school, we've done a couple of things. One, you don't pay to apply to Holberton. In fact, we encourage you to try our application because we think it gives you just a little bit of a taste for what software development is going to be like. We teach you to code a website in HTML. And you know through that experience, hey, this is something that I'm interested in, that I'm intrigued by, or you know what, this isn't the path for me. The second thing we do is that we offer what's called an income share agreement, and the student doesn't have to pay their tuition while they're attending school. Let's say they graduate and get a really stellar job here in the Tulsa market. We would pay they would pay their tuition through a percentage of their income, either up until their tuition cap, the sticker price of the school, or for 42 months, whichever comes first. So it protects that high earner and says, you're never going to pay us more than the value of your tuition. But it also protects someone who says, I'm going to go take the startup job. I'm going to go take the risky job. I'm going to go take the software engineering role at a nonprofit where I'm making 2/3, half of what I could make working for someone that has their name on a big building downtown. And instead of being worried about that extending the amount of time it's going to take me to pay off the schooling that I've committed to, I'm going to pay for these 3.5 years, that percentage of income, and then we consider the contract fulfilled at that time.
And what does that do for a creator who, I'm just imagining, I know so many creators, artists, friends, even myself who, may be hesitant to create certain things or do certain things because you know that there's a risk that you have to put into it in order to create, right? Whether that's time, money, whatever that is. And so a lot of times you don't necessarily know of the value that's going to come from that creation is basically going to offset the investment that you had to put into it. And so maybe it's like, I don't know if I'll do that. But when that kind of curve or that barrier isn't there where, hey, I at least have a ramp to try.
Yeah.
What does that do for people? What have you seen in terms of students, in terms of the desire, the efficacy, the dignity that gives them?
We think it just totally transforms the higher education market. One, we have a trial period. So even before we're talking about tuition owed or graduation, if someone comes and tries Holberton and gets into their first couple of projects and is like, this is not for me, for whatever reason, again, maybe there are external barriers. Maybe it's just that this is not the thing that I'm going to be passionate about, that I want a career in. So be it. We sever ties and there is no financial obligation to that student. So I think that is massive because that's again, awesome. It allows you that space to try to test. I do think on the back end, there's a balance that we try and strike with students. I mean, yes, if a student graduates from Holberton and is not making more than $40,000 a year on that ISA contract, they're not paying us any tuition. So the ownership gets set on the school to say, we have to be helpful in creating an environment where you are able to learn the right skills, you're able to get equipped to have that entry-level job in the field. And it's our obligation to go build relationships and make connections for you and bring people onto campus and kind of build that whole structure around the education system that would let them thrive. The flip side of that coin, and the place that we're always really cautious to make sure that we're counseling students, is like, we're a full-time educational experience. This is not like adding a Coursera class onto your skills. I think that's hard.
You're going to school.
You're going to school and it's to fundamentally get into this sector.
Yeah.
Unlike someone who says, oh, I'm already in the technology sector. Maybe I'm a marketer and I want to learn a little bit of Python. That's awesome. I have like a whole laundry list of places I would recommend that you go for that. But like what we're hoping to do is take, and I've got, countless student examples, but we've got a grad who's working in a green energy tech company now, who was working 80 hours a week on a factory floor.
Wow.
And he has totally pivoted the industry that he is in, the financial trajectory of his life. And he's got a young daughter at home, and he now is impacting her experience in her life financially by way of the number of hours he is working and how he is able to be home with her. And like that is what we're trying to find and do for the individual and then also at scale.
Yeah. Do you see, how would you, at Collective, we say every human is a creator. When you look at your student population, right? Like, do you see almost these like, all these creators who are kind of like finding themselves and then kind of once they even hit that point where it's like, okay, they know who they are, they know what their creative gift is. And then like there's the exponential learning curve that then happens after that in terms of taking this now new known being and then testing that in the market. But then there's another curve of growth where now they're accelerating into purpose, right? Like what is that like seeing, with your over 200 students a year now?
So we really get to see that first curve. And I don't know that we get the front row seat to that exponential growth. From talking to employers where we have placed students, it's talking to them is where I hear that like, oh, this person has been on the team for 3 months and we've already given them a raise and they've already had a title jump and they're just crushing it. And hearing that is like music to my ears. I think explicitly every software engineer is a creator because the ability for you to sit down in front of a blank terminal and build something from scratch is that it is literally creating, and it's building, whether it is websites and the things you think of when you think of software development, apps, software as a service, or now we're getting into this place where our students who are learning augmented reality and virtual reality are like building worlds, like building actual virtual worlds. And I mean, that at scale is just absolutely remarkable.
Do you ever see like some level of impact or effects that happen? I know you see them only at school, but like, do you ever pick up on how them finding themselves and finding their niche impacts other areas of their life? Like in theory, do you become a better spouse? You know what I mean? Like, do you become like, because you're not fighting life as much, maybe, in terms of, okay, every day I'm going to school, I'm going to work, I hate my job, but then like I remember when we did Collective Holberton, when we did the Creator Hackathon, we hosted in April of 2022 Tulsa's first like major hackathon event. And we basically got together like 60 students in Holberton. Some of them were, your more traditional creators, designers. Some were engineers. People did AR projects, VR projects. Like, it was an incredible thing. And the thing that I loved the most was hearing people's stories of when they heard kind of understanding themselves as creators, and then they literally in one weekend of this hackathon experience could then get put into the position of doing that specific creative gift amongst other people who also had their gift that they brought to the table, and then seeing that vision alive. You saw purpose like spewing out of them. Like it was like people went home fulfilled. Like it was like there was a spirit and a light that, I mean, has to just permeate on other things in their life after that.
There is nothing like standing in front of a student who's at a whiteboard, who they've been in front of that whiteboard for 12 hours or 8 hours or whatever it might be. And all of a sudden they turn around to you and you can literally see the light bulb has clicked. And it's so gratifying as work because, one, you're seeing people reach their potential, which is just,
I feel like that's literally all God wants for us.
Be able to do and watch people be successful. But the joy is something that I don't know that not that I don't know. I did not expect how much that would impact this work. That just getting to see someone like step back and beam, however small the task was, however we in our grading portal have like literally red X's and like green check marks and like someone spinning around and saying like, I got a check, like I got the check. And knowing that they're on a pathway to do that at scale over and over again throughout their career. And again, I'll tie it back. We have just some incredible employment partners that we get to work with. Having the employers come up to us and say like, do you know how remarkable this person is? And us to be able to say, yes, we've spent 20 months with them in the trenches.
But now it's validated, right? It's almost like now
but
it's
I'm so glad that you see what we have seen in them. And I talk my team ad nauseum about the micro and the macro. Again, the micro, that student experience I just talked about, that individual light bulb. What does that look like at a macro scale for an entire city if for the next decade, Holberton is able to produce hundreds of software engineers over and over again, and some of them in remote roles and some of them in hyper creative positions. Some of them will go work like really incredible, stable corporate jobs, which is something that they have wanted for themselves for years. I think that starts to shift the fabric of a city and certainly the fabric of an economy. And with an economy that's largely centered around manufacturing jobs, which are likely to be automated away in the coming decades, and an oil and gas sector that continues to evolve and change. And some of the innovation around technology in that energy sector is going to be able to keep a place like Tulsa on the map. And maybe we should be asking the question, what new should put us on the map as a city?
Yeah. And even to that, what are kind of your hopes over this next decade, right? You know, the work that you're doing, what you're doing as a creator, and you have these hypotheses about the impact that that's going to drive to the market. What are your hopes? You know, when you look 10 years from now, what do you want to see in Tulsa?
The dream in building something fresh, and not just like us building Holberton, but all of us that have been here kind of plugged into this idea of a tech ecosystem or a tech industry in Tulsa. We've all been focused on our piece of the puzzle. We've got the other word that gets thrown around is flywheel. Kind of jargony, but it's true, right? If everyone does their part and everyone's running at the same pace or an equal pace, then the flywheel starts to work on its own. And so in my mind, what that looks like practically is a Holberton student who's been at an event with Oklahoma Women in Technology or Techlahoma or 36 Degrees North meets this person, and they're just a person to them. And it's a part of their professional network for, I don't know, a couple years, 5 years, 10 years. And all of a sudden there's this opportunity. Hey, I've got this idea. You've got these technical skills, or we've got this idea together. And you go from, I'm a junior software engineer, to we've got technical co-founders walking around the city. And then you've got this ecosystem of investors and of accelerators and programs that could get someone from ideation all the way to scaled up. And so the day that a Holberton grad is part of one of those rocket ship companies as a founder, as an early team member, or even just as a team member, that's when the flywheel happens without us like brute force moving it along.
Exactly.
And I think ultimately something I've been proud of is being able to build something that, you've done such a good job you can step away from. And to be clear, I love my job. I have the coolest job in the world.
It's working.
But at a system-wide level, what does it look like for us to have those elements, those nodes in the system connecting each other without someone having to go in and force them to connect?
Correct.
That's when I think we'll be able to step back. That and our first IPO. Hey. And I don't mean my first IPO, but I mean the city of Tulsa having a very, very large exit that has financial ripples throughout this community. Doing that once, much less on repeat. I mean, that will be, that's my goal for the next decade. Yeah. Be part of that.
It sounds like your goal is to produce more creators and to do it in a way that sustainably allows creators to be creating with each other, so that network effect can basically continue to drive sustainable returns for the city.
Totally.
I love that.
And for the people in it.
Yeah.
I mean, we use the word city, synonymously, and I do mean like both at a system level.
No, but the citizens
and the people.
Community. Yeah, for sure. So as we wrap up, this podcast is every human is a creator. What would you say if you had a message to give to every human? What would you want to say?
Wow. I'll go back to where we started this conversation, which is that I believe in a ultimate creator. And so I think that there is capacity to build in everyone. But it is likely that if they don't see that in themselves today, it's because they haven't had the people around them, the community around them, telling them that they are worthy and that they are capable. And so, like, to every human, you are worthy and you are capable. And what that capability is or looks like is going to be as unique as the fingerprints on all of us. But that is something that I wish I could instill in every student who walks through our doors, whether they stay with us or move on to their next adventure, to every staff member that I get to hire and work with, and to every person who's, walking around on planet Earth. You are worthy.
I love you, friend.
I love you. Thanks for having me. This has been lovely.
Of course. And this is every human.
Outstanding.